My dear God's loving people, it's always a privilege to be invited for a great party, for a sumptuous dinner. Most of us enjoy being invited and then later to be a part of such parties or such banquets. The most important part of any celebration is the meal, which we do not usually miss. While most of us enjoy being invited, there are some who take a great delight in inviting people and organizing a dinner. They enjoy being good hosts to their guests, inviting people to strengthen their bonds of friendship over a meal and also to celebrate victories in their life. Banquets in the Bible were elaborate meals or feasts that were part of the observance of religious festivities or social enjoyment. They are prominent in growing in friendship and celebrating victories. We find in both the Old Testament and the New Testament several banquets. In today's first reading and the Gospel passage, we have a picture of a rich banquet. The chapter 25 of Isaiah presents the song of praise as Isaiah sees God as a deliverer, as a victor and a comforter. The book of Isaiah also has some messianic messages, and here he tells what the Messiah will do at his coming. The salvation of the nations is presented as a feast, a grand feast. The invited guests are those from all the nations. So its menu also is presented, and the place of celebration, it says, on this mountain, which means it would be in Jerusalem, the same place from where the mission of Jesus started and ended, and the mission of his disciples began to the ends of the earth. Now let's move on to the Gospel passage, which presents the parable of the wedding banquet, also called as the parable of a great dinner. In the New Testament, we see Jesus as he walked on this earth, using several occasions of banquet to preach about the kingdom of God. But today, he teaches through a parable about the kingdom of God. It's like a banquet, he says. What Jesus intends here is something to predict about the future, keeping the present realities in mind. And this also speaks about the eschatological fulfillment of his ministry. These previous Sundays, we have seen Jesus speaking through parables. In the previous parable, the sin of the people was the lack of the fruits of righteousness. But in today's parable, the sin is in the rejection of the message of grace or the message of salvation. Let's get into the Gospel passage. The king intends to celebrate the wedding feast of his son, and therefore he sends out servants to invite people. He sends his message to the people who had been invited to come and enjoy the dinner or the banquet. But the people who had been invited refused to come. This is an insult to the king. It is an offense to the king. But the king does not get offended badly. He remains patient. He sends again for the second time to call those who were invited to be a part of this celebration. But again, the people refused. Who are these people who had been invited? They are the Jews, the chosen people of God. First, the invitation was given to them, but they refused. Some of them just ignored the message, showed their interest in the material world, in the activities of this world. Some of them even maltreated the servants of the king. They paid no attention to know what was being actually celebrated. And therefore, the people of Israel deserves God's judgment. And the judgment that is presented in the passage points to the prediction of the destruction of the Jerusalem temple, which actually happened in the year 70 AD by the Romans. Although they did not burn the city completely, the temple was totally destroyed. Since the people who were invited did not come, the invitation was sent out now to everybody, to all people, good as well as bad. This points to the invitation being opened not only to the Jews who are of good heart, but also to the Gentiles. Now, this does not mean that once invited, you will be accepted in the wedding banquet hall. Although the good and bad are invited, they need to have the garment of righteousness. Only when they have this garment of righteousness, they will be admitted into the banquet hall. And then they will be a part of this grand celebration of the marriage feast of the Son of the King. This is made very vivid in the incident that is presented towards the end of the parable, where the king finds a person who was without the wedding garment. He pretended to be righteous, but he was not. He was actually a hypocrite, and therefore was not allowed to enter the joy of celebration. He was thrown out. My dear God's people, first of all, let's remember that God cares for us, and therefore He invites every one of us to the wedding banquet. He does not give up on us even though we reject at times. And when we accept finally the invitation, we are called to put on the garment of righteousness. Only then we would be admitted into the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, this parable teaches us to accept God's invitation and to respond to it positively. May God bless all of you.